Hello again, people, and welcome to another BoP review of a disappointing game, but one we have to talk about nevertheless. Um, so we lost quite convincingly to Palace, and we have to discuss how that happened and what the implications are for the future in terms of what's going to go on for the rest of the season. So let's talk about it. And I'm with George and CK again. How are we doing, fellas?
Good, bro. Not too bad. Busy at work. Sorry, people, for the changing of scheduled time. It was crazy today. It was one of those work days. But yeah, not too bad, bro. Not too bad. I think like when you look at it, I got a lot of flack for my initial thoughts. But I think hopefully these screenshots that we show will explain things a lot better because there were some wrong criticisms for me, and we finally got scouted. The one thing I'll say, and ironically, Vieira did what we employ. So when we look at what we do off the ball, whether it was Douglas Luiz against Villa, looking at that 1-2 press, this is exactly something that Vieira did to us very simply on Thomas Partey, and the players struggled to adapt to that. And the biggest thing is when you start looking kind of basically at the preview was, okay, a lot of the matchups that we thought with Tierney was a very significant one. And discussing kind of what happened with Tavares, because for me, he did get a little bit of unnecessary flack, but at the same token, he was quite poor in one specific thing. But beyond that, Zaha was a problem, something that, I was surprised to see him. I think there was a little bit of a fib in terms of maybe his injury because because there's no way that you're coming back from a grade 2 or even grade 1 hammy strain. That's just not happening inside a week. So I think he was ultimately fine, but that had a big impact on the match because it meant that if Vieira was able to complete his press that what he normally did with Nuno Tavares, it totally changed the dynamic of the left-hand side, which, by the way, was going to be always our most important side because they struggled down the Klein-Anderson route. And they're very strong on the left regardless. And their employment of a pivot meant that in buildup, we were outnumbered. It was really, really simple. So for me, I was insisting that we would change things if that was going to be the case, but we haven't. And there should be a discussion that we have right now between away Lacazette. There needs to be a discussion. I understand Arteta won't do it, but yeah, that's going to be difficult, Tony, because I think the center of the pitch is exactly what we lacked.
Nice.
When I looked through what happened was we found that U-shaped passing, and there was a big reason for that. Our central progression was cut off. It was a very simple tactic. We employ it, for God's sakes, and it was very frustrating not to have it. But instead of beating around the bush, maybe we just jump into it. But I don't know what Chris was thinking. But for me, I was watching this game and getting visibly frustrated. And the changes that we did at halftime basically got what we wanted in terms of a more traditional pivot. And that, in shock horror, we ended up having a completely different half, creating tons of chances, by the way, 2 ESR chances. The Odegaard missed an open goal. It's becoming a theme now. And lastly, Nketiah had a brilliant effort at the corner. So there needs to be a discussion with these two, Odegaard and Lacazette. Everyone thinks I've got an agenda, but it's becoming pattern ultimately at this point. And if you're not going to do one and you're going to do another, then you need to change things because it was just frustrating seeing the two halves, Karan. Like that,
it was very much so.
At the 25th minute, when Nuno Tavares got the chance to stretch his legs, he killed them. There was one burst he did after the goals. He cut through the middle at the 25th minute and opened Anderson and Klein, and I'm just sitting there thinking, mate, if you had the license to do that and be one of the fifth channels, we wouldn't be looking at a loss. So I think it was fair that Arteta got some of the criticism, and he took it well in his press conference. He admitted it kind of as such. I think it was a little bit of a systemic problem. We've been kind of talking about this. And so for me, I can't wait to get into it because I think people's perceptions on who did well. I had this big debate. Let's put it, I'm beating around the bush. It's about Granit Xhaka, ultimately. And, I hope through some of these rewatch and these stills, people can understand that while it's instruction from Mikel, the players need to adapt to something. And this idea, if things aren't working, should the players continue looking at a philosophy that does? No, not in my opinion. And moving Granit Xhaka back to left back was a decision that Mikel did, but it was a justified progression issue. It was plain to see his lack of coming deep to help with the 1-2 press on Thomas Partey would have solved all our problems. And in fact, it did. Putting him in the left back position added another build-up option deep. It made a pseudo pivot. And it allowed for Emil to be pushed between the lines, and shock horror, we started creating chances. And it was a simple system change. Instead of going 3-1, we went 3-2. Granit would step up. Yeah, he was in left back, but he basically stepped up into the midfield, and shock horror, we still had our width. And I think that becomes an issue for me. If you're asked to set up a certain way, I can understand that. But if things aren't going your way, and this is the same thing in life, you may have a plan, and if it's not going your way, are you going to keep doing the thing that you know isn't working? For me, he's an experienced player. We needed him, Lacazette, Odegaard. We needed these experienced players to step up, and they just don't do it. And so when that's happening, for me, that becomes an issue. Someone should have said, listen, Thomas is getting nowhere. He's being double marked consistently. We need to drop deep. Like this is football. There needs to be some ingenuity at some point here. And so while I think Mikel should have known a little bit better, I've been calling for a way to adopt a little bit more of a double pivot. But even if you don't, and let's take that out, because there were some issues at the back. Ben White, uncharacteristically loose, was frazzled by the Crystal Palace atmosphere. Gabriel, super poor. Nuno couldn't give him a straight pass. It was always bouncing. Very poor technical security. But guys, we were getting up the pitch and doing a U, and we had zero central progression. And that was because Lacazette couldn't trap something if he was a hunter. Odegaard was chasing his touch for a majority of the first half, and Granit Xhaka refused to drop deep. And I think it's really clear in a lot of the screenshots. And when you watch the simple change of putting Granit Xhaka deep, basically having Martinelli wide as the touchline winger and Emil inside, like, we can do this with Nuno. We can do this rotation. I think people get hung up on this far too often, where they get hung up on the profile. But guys, it was very simple about adding somebody deep. You don't have to overcomplicate it. When Granit was deep in that left back role, he provided an option to that center progressor, and it opened things for us completely. We tore through Palace. We did. And in fact, if you look, what probably the most frustrating thing of the night, Curran, is you look at the overall chances, and Arsenal had similar expected goals to Crystal Palace at the end of the day. And so, if they were composed, we could have salvaged the game. I don't know how Odegaard missed. That was a clear open shot. Emil, unlucky, but he wasn't composed at all. But Emil was the only one willing to be direct and offering something between the lines. So I struggle to really criticize him. He was somebody that was the only one that could look at himself positively in that half. And then going into the second half, we changed shape and we looked confident. We looked able to impose ourselves. And look, you got to be composed when you're presented those chances, right? Like, when you look back at it, guys, the Emil Smith Rowe chance happened at like the 65th minute. Then the Odegaard chance happened at like the 70th minute, and it was still 2-1 at this point. And guys, there needs to be a discussion why Martin Odegaard goes to ground in the penalty box. Did it at Manchester United. He does it now. He doesn't have to make the challenge. And I think what the divide is, guys, is when you criticize people's favorite players, people get defensive. But these are really simple mistakes that you just can't be doing away. You give the opposition and the crowd a chance to get on their back. And that's not something that you can do away. That's not something we were doing away. So, yeah, mate, like, I don't know. I can't wait to get into the screenshots, because when people tell me that Granit Xhaka was doing good and was offering high, when you look at the goal, everyone shouted at Gabriel and Nuno. The first thing I sent in our group chat is, look at Granit Xhaka. Look at where he is. And that's not a Mikel instruction, by the way, because we press in a 4-4-2. So I can't wait to start showing some of the screenshots, because, mate, he's just out of position. It's not just that he's asked to be high. He's just simply out of position.
Yeah, I mean, CK, what do you think of this, of that game? Would you have any initial thoughts before we get into it?
Well, George says he doesn't know what I think, but during the game, I was messaging him about like um certain things that I saw during the game. Obviously, the one the man mark on the deep progressor press that they did, the 4-4-1-1, was flipping between Mateta and Gallagher, depending on who was ball side, and it worked. And obviously, if we played how I wanted us to play, it wouldn't have worked to the same extent. Xhaka being so high in build up made it work so much better than it would have, because Partey was outnumbered the whole game, like
But aren't
consistently.
you frustrated, mate? Because we do this. This is what we do. We employ the 1-2 press, guys. We have Odegaard sit on their DM, opposition DMs all the time.
But
Like,
the thing with me is that obviously that happened, but even with that happening, that we found ways to evade that by bypassing Partey in build up. But whenever we bypass Partey in build up, Odegaard and Lacazette couldn't trap the ball at all in the first half. Like Lacazette's first, yeah, this is Xhaka, high in build up, and this is very early in the build up because Tavares just received the ball from Gabriel, so this is basically the 2-3-5. Cedric is right, and Xhaka is the highest player in our team, which is honestly crazy to me. It really is. Like, what do you think,
I
Jim?
think there's for me, there's a difference between offering. So the reason he has to be high, we've talked about this kind of early in earlier shows, is because Lacazette's in midfield. He is, and it's ridiculous that he's the one offering the double pivot. But Granit Xhaka's role then as the inside man is to stretch the opposition box, right? So when you've got a guy dropping deep like that, just to open up space, you need somebody high. But what that does is it basically cuts Nuno Tavares' options off, because immediately when Nuno receives in that area, even if he wanted to, guys, who's the option? Because there's three men there. Like, you can immediately see it. There's no option. Lacazette isn't making that run across. Of course, Partey is marked by Gallagher, who again was completely man marked the entire time. I'm not upset at it, but Vieira did exactly what we do, and we've been scouted. So in order to respond to that, Emil has to stay high to keep an option, but then Granit has to drop guys. Like, that's part of the triangle. He's avoiding play. And even though Mikel will ask you to stay high, that doesn't mean you hide. This is the difference. Staying high is not the same as hiding. And for me, he was hiding. He didn't offer an option. He has to drop to the halfway line at least, provide that option where, if Emil receives the ball from Nuno, he has an option behind him to play a wall pass to. Right? Like, these are basics of
He would
football.
also have space in the half space to make a run if he wanted to, because generally when we do deep build up, them three, Xhaka, Lacazette, and Erdegaard, are all in the halfway line, but he's the only one that's high. And then Emil and Saka touchline would be very high to stretch the pitch, but he didn't move from that spot at all, because Lacazette was even dropping a lot deeper than this. Like, he was
Oh,
sometimes.
absolutely. And mate, like, the frustrating part to me is, again, like, in another area of, here's Lacazette once again dropping deep, and look at where Granit Xhaka is. And this for me is ridiculous. You're in the right half space. That should be Odegaard if he is going to drop deep. Okay. And the rotations just weren't really good all game. But what we're basically doing is we're playing into Palace's hands. Like, they've man marked us down there. And of course, Mateta is on Thomas Partey at this specific moment. But,
Yeah,
we
that's
can't.
the ball side. That's the ball side switch. So if White had the ball, Gallagher would be marking White, and if Gabriel had if White has the ball, Mateta marks Partey, and when Gabriel has the ball, Gallagher marks Partey. They kept switching like that all game to force one of the centre backs to go forward rather than pass it to each other.
And part of it, I guess, the frustrating thing here is when you're seeing a theme at this point of, there's a difference between, okay, when you're high, you do it to stretch opposition. And again, the reason that we have Xhaka high is because Lacazette drops so deep that he is a midfielder. First off, it's ridiculous, but then we need somebody to create a box presence. But what kills me is, why can't you have somebody like Gabriel Martinelli making that run? If you're asking him to stay high just to create a box presence, would you not want a more prolific goal scorer in that position? Because he's not dropping deep. So then it's a discussion of role. It's a discussion of what we need. But this was clearly a problem that we suffered. And I probably want to just go to the goal if you guys want, because for me, the first goal is a little bit ridiculous on Nuno. What he struggled in the first half was that blindside run. and he wasn't doing well technically, so he dropped. He got nervous, right? Like he was dropping the line consistently. It happened on the set piece. He doesn't do well aerially, which is a shock. That is a strong point. I thought he did really well later into the half, but that was after, I think, being castrated by Mikel to stop dropping so deep. He was forcing the line back, but I think when we go to kind of the goal in the second goal, this goal annoyed me the most, and I think it will show a lot of the frustrations that we have. And make no mistake, Lacazette and Odegaard were so poor technically, it made this problem worse. So when Granit doesn't show, normally that isn't a problem because Martin Odegaard's been really secure technically. But again, if you don't have that technique down the right, you as the experienced player, by the way, the leader in build-up for the last 4 years, needs to recognize, I need to drop and help the team. They're struggling. The young back line is not being technical. They're getting buoyed by the crowd. I need to drop and I need to set the pace because my partner in Thomas Partey is being covered. But when you start looking at this, so this is the goal where Anderson basically receives at the halfway point. Guys, Granit Xhaka, he's in no man's land, but he's the only one pushing up to press. Now, this immediately is a breakdown. We don't do this under Arteta. We don't. But here, it was very clear that there was an overload. Palace were unsuccessful. We actually defended really well. So they go to kind of recycle the ball. Then we kind of switch, and Nuno is deep. Don't get me wrong. Nuno is a little bit deep, but he's fearful of kind of Mateta, who's been destroying him the entire half. So I can understand it. But guys, I want to focus. Who is meeting Anderson at the halfway line? It's Granit Xhaka. That is not good, guys. And what's worse is when Gabriel misses. And the reason Gabriel misses, by the way, is because Gallagher draws him in. But if Granit Xhaka was where Gallagher is, Gabriel doesn't follow Gallagher. And that is the breakdown in the system. And when we do a 4-4-2, by the way, Odegaard is the top two. You've got Lacazette and Odegaard. Those are your pressing two in a 4-4-2. But here, Granit Xhaka has done that. And what is bad is Granit Xhaka, when we defends as one of the two with Thomas Partey in a 4-4-2. That was the breakdown. So Gabriel, sure, he shouldn't have followed Gallagher, but I'll be honest with you guys, if you don't follow Gallagher and he receives between the lines, we're yelling at Gabriel to be aggressive, aren't we? So he's caught a little bit in no man's land where he has to. Now, Nuno should step. He should recognize this so he can get Mateta offside, but he fails. So that's a part on Nuno that we need to criticize. But Granit can't be this high. And it was just emblematic, essentially, kind of doing what, Lacazette's or Odegaard's role, one of the two, doing his role. And for me, that is what I talk about when I say that for me, he hit and build up. It was really clear kind of all half. And then when you get into the second half, look, guys, we changed it up. We took Nuno off, which I think is harsh too. Maybe we have a discussion about whether that was the right decision to do. I feel for the lad. Like, he was struggling. Don't get me wrong. I wanted Granit Xhaka deep, and the substitutes basically gave us that, right? Like, we took out Nuno, Martinelli was the touchline option, and then ESR came inside. And we started having a pseudo double pivot because, Granit was left back, but really he would just step in midfield, right? Like in possession. And we had a two there, and we were able to outnumber them because Conor Gallagher was doing a man marking job, but he couldn't cover both. And that's how we cut through them. And we did. Super frustrating because then when you get to that second half, the boys did well, and we just needed composure, right? Emile normally is so good in those positions. I think the first chance that he had, he tries to dig it out of his feet unsuccessfully. The second one, you could just tell it's not your day. He makes good contact, but he's got to put it in the corner a bit more. Odegaard frustrates the heck out of me in that position. He needs to finish. And he clipped it off his weak foot too. It's just a poor finish, and he's in acres of space. There's no one pressuring him. But I think maybe the best part of those halves are essentially Nketiah and Lokonga, who made really strong cameos. I kind of came out of the game thinking, look, we struggled in the build-up. We got scouted. How do we change this? Mikel has to go back to that pivot, especially if you're going to be away and you're going to assume that our technical level is going to drop, right? like it doesn't make sense for me to continue doing this if you know that you're not going to get the same Lacazette, you're not going to get the same Odegaard, because these are two players that thrive in a confidence, but also just environment. And I think maybe just to quickly answer, Tezzy, no, mate, like I think it's a blip. A lot of basics went wrong. For me, this is why I'm so frustrated, because the basics just didn't happen, and we haven't stopped doing the basics in a majority of our games. Like that's never been the issue. So a big reason is it was system, right? Like I think that's the big reason. You don't go 3-0 down and change your starting sub when things go right, So for me, I was a little bit baffled when people were.
I didn't like that he took off Tavares because, well, for me, I was trying to take off Lacazette because he was a big issue. He couldn't trap the ball. Him and Odegaard couldn't trap the ball, so we couldn't keep the ball up the pitch. So whenever you fire the ball into them, the ball just bounced straight back to Gallagher or whoever it was. And Tavares, although he wasn't our best player, he definitely wasn't our worst for me. And I think our fullbacks obviously were in a lot of 1v1 situations, a lot of Gallagher versus Tavares, and then Zaha versus Cedric, and they got a lot of like damage from being in those situations, but they weren't the worst players. And I don't think Arteta's doing anybody any good by consistently taking off Tavares early. He's not helping.
That for me is the trouble, because it's already been done before. And in fact, his 3 times that he's been.
When you're hurting his confidence that much, and we all know he's going to play now, like you have no option but to play him. You shouldn't have done that again. Like for me,
I think it's a decision though, mate. Is where so let's look at what the impact of taking off a Lacazette does, for example, right? If you do that, you move Emile inside, and the thing is, I think he wanted another attacking addition. You can't put on Martinelli, essentially. That would be the impact, though. So if you did take off Lacazette, who had a really bad game, but technically in the left half space, he was going to tell Grant to drop. You would basically be sacrificing Nuno for the widest channel than Martinelli. That was the decision he made, essentially. And I think for me, the only reason is because Nuno underlaps quite a bit. If you go back to one of Nuno's really good games in terms of that Newcastle game, do you guys remember when Granit and Lokonga would fill in for him? He wasn't the widest channel. He started there, but he underlaps. Nuno in profile is actually really good for this role, the inverted left back, and he really underlaps quite well. But that would force Emile wide again. So when he attacks, Nuno likes to be that inside channel of the 5, and Emile kind of likes to be inside, but I think it would force him wide, and you'd be putting a less technical secure option inside. That's why I don't think he took off Lacazette. I'm not a fan of Lacazette. I think Martinelli should start now, period. In that role, or Nketiah, we need somebody that's going to give us a lot more technical security and to get in the box. We don't need another midfielder. We need somebody that's willing to attack the box. And Eddie showed in 15 minutes why he deserves a shout, to be honest with you. He was all over the place. He was energetic, and he's an away day player, though. I think there should be a discussion about home and away players. Just because, this new substitute change has basically meant that, in the future, a lot of managers are going to look at the idea of a squad, but I think we need to really start looking at who in our squad is really good away and who is really good home, because we can't lose this tyranny and go into a capitulation, which I don't think we need to, guys. Like, by the way, people were claiming that Tierney wasn't good defensively in the last couple of weeks, and it's just.
For me, like with the away stuff, I think obviously the tactics from having Xhaka so high were poor, in my opinion. But you can't legislate for Lacazette and Odegaard being that poor technically without contact, because a lot of the passes or the touches they were messing up weren't like, they were covered in a lot of contact. Like, they messed up very easy positions in the first half that just completely killed any chance of us having any quality forward. Like, for me, Lacazette was poor first half, and then second half, he just got outshone by everybody else. So he was one of the poorest. He was probably our poorest player on the day. And next game for me, he shouldn't start. Like, versus Brighton, I wouldn't start him.
Yeah, and I mean, look, in order to maximize this, right? Like, I think for me, I really want to see Emile in this false nine role with Lacazette if you're dead set on it. So that keeps Emile inside as well. It'll put him deep central. So where you're seeing Lacazette receive, Emile is 10 times better. And I put Martinelli left, but having Nuno as your left back means he can attack the inside channel. So this really, for me, is kind of the big difference that you're going to see, right? And that's how I would change this up if you're dead set on having a 9 that drops deep. And so it would kind of keep Martinelli where he's best, and it would keep Nuno where he's best as well, because he's not just high and wide in a sense that he's always in the wide channel. He's more somebody that starts wide, but he always drives inside. Nuno prefers to drop to underlap. He doesn't overlap in the same way. Even with Newcastle and all of the other roles that we had, he's an underlapper, right? So in that front three, that's a really creative way of having Granit Xhaka deep, which will help us in progression. It'll give another partner, but it allows Nuno to be in and out, who that's what he loves. Martinelli is somebody that loves to be in and out. And of course, in Emile, you get somebody that's a lot more secure in contact. So that's kind of my solution for this long term, especially if Emile or Nuno rather is going to be in the team long term. Because when you look away, yeah, I mean, he has to be. Like, there's no other explanation. And if we know that Granit has to be deep at this point, it's about how do we put the team and those players in the best way possible. And again, I've seen some debates about having Nuno high and wide, Granit Xhaka deep, and Emile inside. The only issue is Nuno isn't quite an overlapper.
Yeah, he's not Tierney.
He's not Tierney, and while he can hold the width, he can do that. He can deliver a good cross.
He doesn't want to.
He doesn't want to. He drives inside. Look at his best run in the game. Did he go inside or outside?
In the one where he set up the Saka chance.
There you go.
The Saka cross, and then
So if he's going to do that, and that's where he's best, where he provides thrust, no problem. Let's support it, right? So essentially what you're doing to support it is you have Emile do the Lacazette role, who's going to drop deep. Have Martinelli wide touch line, which again stretches the pitch. It's where he wants to be. So then you put people in those 5 channels that facilitate them. I think the biggest issue I've had with people is ensuring, it's a 4-3-3, it's a 4-2-3-1. Guys, let's just forget it. Look at those inside channels. What are the role? The wide channel has to hold the width. Martinelli will do that excellently. The inside channel needs to have drive and attack the box. Okay? Nuno can do that. That's where Nuno is best. Okay? If you're going to have him high in the final third, he prefers the underlap. So let him underlap in the inside channel. And where is Emile Smith-Rowe best? In the center of the pitch. And he creates a much better touch than I think he'll work excellently with Odegaard, by the way. Especially
they'll rotate in and out, and they'll do it quite well as well. So I don't know, man. It feels like there's going to be a lot of different changes. I mean, I've been listening to you guys for a bit, and I've just wanted to have a quick couple of points. I mean, the main thing I think with changes going forward, you've got to talk about how I think George put it very well. What roles do you want to facilitate in this team, and how do you want to make sure we get the best out of this team? In terms of profiles, I was a fan of Gabby up top and maybe Nketiah wide, or maybe even Tavares wide. But the thing is, you guys are right. If you're going to have Nuno, you've got to we need him confident. We can't have him stuttering. We need to keep. The main thing is we have to have him high. That's the main thing. That's the first thing. Before anything else, he has to be high, especially in build-up. I don't want him dropping into the 3. He needs to be in that wide left channel where he can actually receive and drive. He can't be further back when he's going to get nervous. He'll fumble. He might lose the ball, and we're in trouble in transition. So it's got to be.
I think we need to put him into. Yeah. What you're saying is we need to put him in the positions to get his confidence high as quick as possible, because we only have really 9 games for him to play, where Tierney's going to be injured. So unless he goes Xhaka or Saka left back, which will annoy me, or Cedric left back, he'll go Tavares left back for 9 games, and then allow Tavares to find form as quick as possible. Because obviously, at the start of the season, he was performing well. Like, he was performing well and to a level where people believed he was better than Tierney. And the debate was caused because of his performances. Maybe agendas, but his performances warranted praise. So we need to get him to a place, because since the Liverpool mistake, he hasn't been good. That Liverpool mistake, since that, he hasn't been good. Everton, he was poor when he came off the bench. Watford, he was poor. So since that Liverpool mistake, Forest as well, yeah. So since that mistake, he hasn't been good. So for me, we just need to find just to play him, and Arteta can't take him off first half again. He can't do it. That's just going to ruin him and not help us at all. Maybe it's this tough love that he thinks will get into his brain, that if you keep making these mistakes, you'll get taken off early. But it's not helping at all. Like, he was just as bad as he was versus Nottingham Forest, and he was even our worst player. What day was it? Monday, which was crazy to me. But yeah, like, next game we can't take him off early, and then I think we should get into the second half.
Yeah, quickly, it is an ESR false nine formation. I just hate that word, because I feel like people think that anybody that drops deep is like a false nine, and that's just not true. But yeah, if it helps you think mentally, mate, like it's whatever Lacazette is doing. Lacazette is not a striker. He is a midfielder.
Another 10. He's another 10.
He's another 10. And ESR gives you that ability to burst into space. And that'll work really well with Odegaard, who, even if he's struggling, again, I kind of look at things very pessimistically, where, look, if Odegaard's on his game, we don't have this struggle, because we can get out and we can use the right side. But let's say he doesn't, which is very likely away. And there are times Lacazette and Odegaard don't do well away. We've seen enough of this. But even if if he does do well, having an Emile Smith-Rowe next to him is, it's going to be a lot better for him to create the space. You'll have somebody that'll drop deep and lay off really quickly to him, and you'll get your physical backboard. The same reason that he probably needs like a Dominic Calvert-Lewin, a Haaland, an Isaac. What they do is they come deep, either his physical backboard, and Emile is immense at that, especially under pressure. He's the only one that can receive first time and give it to you. So he would actually free Odegaard a lot more.
They're also very able to make the run after the touch. Like, after Lacazette lays off, it takes a couple seconds of you having to like shield the ball, protect it before you can find him as an outlet. But Emile just quickens that process a lot, because once you do, he's more explosive than probably every centre back in the league. So if you do put him in that position to receive deep and turn and face that Lacazette tries to do and isn't effective, it will be a lot more beneficial. And whenever Odegaard is confident, he does love the combination play in the middle of the park, just showing off, and that is very good for Emile as well as Lacazette, obviously. But Emile is a lot better than it at Lacazette, and he'll play to Emile's strengths as well as Odegaard's when he's confident.
And I think, look, Tony, like really quickly, like of course it can be both. I'm just saying naturally Nuno prefers to underlap. That is his preference between the two. It's not a black and white. What you're talking about, this interchange is true, but what you need to understand is the left back in this scenario is going to stay deep, and that's going to be Granit. So between the left center mid and the left wing, whoever you want to put in there, it's likely, depending on their tendencies, that Nuno will want to underlap. It's likely that Martinelli will want to pull wide. That's a lot of their natural tendencies that they seem to do. It's not fixed. It doesn't mean then that they're only going to be in those scenarios. But what you are allowing is for them to express themselves where they're best. So if they're going to constantly underlap, and you know this, and you know that Nuno is most comfortable underlapping, then you need to supply him with somebody that's deep defensively and really good positionally, which is Granit, which is fine. And then you need to supply him with somebody that wants to stay wide. That's essentially what you're kind of looking at. And while it didn't work great against Villarreal, this is the same role that we're asking Lacazette to do right now. This is, I think, part of the problem, because people look at it and see that, oh, it's working with Lacazette, therefore Lacazette's the only one that can do it. It's just a role. It's just what you're asking that player in that position to do. So for me, it needs to be explored again, particularly if you know that you're going to facilitate Nuno. And that's really ultimately what we're doing here, right? Like another option is to one I'm not a fan of to keep the 4-3-3, but basically have Xhaka left back and move Emil inside. Now, the reason I'm not really a big fan of that is because I think it telegraphs our movement. It just means Martinelli and Saka are going to be high and wide, and they're just going to attack inwards constantly. And for me, that's easy to defend against. It makes both sides of the pitch really quite easy.
But isn't what Palace did to us by cutting off the passing lane and forcing Lacazette to receive poorly? Well, you can't force him to receive poorly, but he received poorly with all that pressure. Isn't that just as predictable as the system you're saying with the 4-3-3?
For me, the 4-3-3 becomes really predictable then because you also know where Granite's going to go. It's a little bit less because Emil's deeper. Emil offers you that variation, so you'll be a little bit better in that instance. But you're right, like Lacazette crashing deep makes it kind of a diamond.
He makes it a lot easier. He makes it a lot easier to defend against by cutting off the passing lane, and he's not dynamic enough to evade pressure from behind.
Well, we know that tip of the diamond won't move. That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
The reason that tip of the diamond can be very good because you have an instant like Gallagher who draws your center back in, but the center back doesn't have to worry Lacazette's not burning him for base behind. So
That's
he can follow Lacazette, and then it becomes easy to cut off.
Where he did it.
Yeah.
And he pressed him so well that Lacazette, I think he was dispossessed like 5 times in the first half alone.
But again, Guehi doesn't do that with Emil Smith-Rowe. That's the difference. So that's why I prefer the system personally, where let's keep Nuno at left back. And by the way, that means that they defend in areas at their best. Granite can still defend in the middle of the park. Nuno can defend wide, right? Like the first system that I'm talking about, I think, is a lot better for the players in terms of where they.
I agree with you. But I'm just saying that if Lacazette is going to be the guy to be at the tip of the team rather than Emil like you want, then I'd prefer the second because he's starting to really frustrate me with.
Oh, you mean like if Lacazette is 100% a non-negotiable?
Yeah.
And we're accommodating Lacazette?
Yeah, because he's really starting to frustrate me with his inability to consistently trap the ball.
Well, if Lacazette is in the teammate, you need the 4-3-3 because he's not going to be technically secure. That's why you need it. And so it matters basically, are we going to accommodate Nuno or are we going to accommodate Lacazette? That's the decision that we're going to make with Tierney out. Now, for me, I don't worry too much with Thomas because it doesn't seem like a serious injury just by the way that they're saying that they're just waiting for a specialist to see. So for me, that means that they don't think it's a tear because otherwise he would have gone into surgery. Very similar to Tierney, who everyone says they're waiting to see a specialist, but he got into surgery like this week. So you kind of know with these things really quickly with an MRI. So it makes me think that they're unsure of how damaged Thomas is, and a lot of it is precaution. But in theory, Lokonga, who I think deserves praise, this is somebody that I give a lot of hardship to. He came in and did phenomenal, guys. I don't care that it was towards the end of the game. He was making excellent decisions and dictating play. I think he did really, really well. And Eddie deserves praise. I think if you had any pros in that game, it would be Emil for what he was doing in the first half. And then Lacazette and Eddie Nketiah were absolutely immense. So, I think for me, the one thing is I was going to ask you guys, like, where do you guys see the solutions? Because everyone's going to have their own solution, and I don't think it's perfect. But the one thing that I would say for my team is that it basically puts players in their natural positions. I don't think that we were doing that with Xhaka left back, starting in possession and out of possession. So it hurts you there as well as in midfield. And, if you keep Lacazette on the pitch, struggles, I think that has to be the decision ultimately. Lacazette can't be there, especially when we have somebody that can do his role. That's
why I was saying to you. I was saying to you and Karen straight after the game that he's gonna have to make a decision on Lacazette because he could have a very big impact on what we can do in the next games because they're not going to be the easiest of games because the teams we're playing have things to play for. Like Brighton have a relegation to fight for. Like there's stuff that we can't afford to lose with him. And obviously, like he was very poor and he seemed undroppable because of the captaincy and all this stuff. But for me, um, I've said it. I was saying it all along the game that Arteta needs to make a decision on if he'll allow Lacazette to be the be all and end all of this current team. Because obviously in the summer we're going to change him up, and we all know. But as of right now, I think he should drop him. And for my ideal team, Lacazette won't start, and he'd be on the bench. And I'd honestly play any other striker option we have other than him, because he's been so poor recently, and he really hurt us in that game. Like after going 1-0 down, you want to keep the ball. You want to be able to build pressure, sustain pressure up the pitch, so the threat of you conceding is lower. And he didn't allow us to do that. He killed us, honestly. And at 2-0, obviously in the second half you can score, and then 2-1, but at 2-0 at someone else's ground is very hard against one of the best defenses in the league to get back up, and he killed
Ultimately, mate, what I am a fan of here is, look, I think it'll allow both of them to explode, but forget this. Ultimately what you're doing is you're putting your biggest goal threats together. When you don't have a ideal team, you need to put players that are close combination players together. That's what you need to do as a coach. And you can't overcomplicate things. And you need to put players where they're comfortable. So for me, this front three has everything, and it allows Odegaard to thrive. It allows Partey to thrive. It allows Xhaka to thrive. It allows those players to thrive. And while you don't have that consistent Tierney outlet that you assume, okay, let's just sacrifice that area, at least make the other areas of your team better. So that's the big thing for me. We kind of agree. Current, what are your thoughts on the best way to solve this problem? Because I think that was basically the story of this match. How do we solve?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it's quite clear. I think the main thing is we need to run our build up through Granit. I think Granit has to be the one who takes the reins now. I think, especially with Thomas there. But the thing is, we have to allow Sambi to be that guy to break lines with his passing, to run in space, to do what he does best, and give the responsibility to Granit. He has to be there for us right now. What I did like in the second half that I don't think anyone's mentioned yet is we were allowing Palace to collapse on the left, and Saka had so much space for those switches consistently in that second half. And it reminds me of the FA Cup run, because we kept building through on that case the right to free up Aubameyang on the left. And when you have Saka in that much space, I mean, Tariq Mitchell, first of all, what a defender that guy is. I mean, I'd love him on our team right now. He had a great game. I think with me, it's a case of, look, our main progressive midfielder is on the left side of that pivot. We need to run it through him. If it means that we go, if we switch it at the last minute to free up Saka, or we go through the phases and eventually rotate onto getting a cut back into the box, or a shot from around the box, or even a crossing or something like this, that doesn't really matter. But I think we need to exploit our best player, our franchise player in Bukayo Saka, and get him one-on-one with the opposing left back. I think that's got to be something we've got to do, because we're looking to score goals right now. Another thing, obviously, I said on Twitter earlier I would have Martinelli up front or Eddie, and I still stick by that. I think that's got to be a major thing. I think you have to. I think, especially at this point of the season, you can see Lacazette just doesn't have the legs, especially in that role where he's dropping that deep. You can't have. We need someone that can drop deep but can also run into the box. You have to have that explosivity both ways. You can't have it one way just to play up and build up. You need to be able to do that both ways, and he's just not providing that right now. So for me, I think because Eddie had a great cameo, I think, in terms of being able to make runs off the ball, free up space, get a couple of chances off, make those runs in the channels. I think he did quite well. So he would definitely be an option. I think Martinelli has to come back in. But for me, the main thing is free up space and use your best players. I think that's the best. That's the most. Those are the key points. Make sure you free up a Bukayo. Make sure you give the responsibility to Xhaka. Xhaka has to be the guy now. He has to be that guy to take control of the build up. Either he drops in as a 3, or he moves further up. And even though I don't really want him to, I would prefer him to drop deep and then take the ball and control it. But if you I do want him higher, he needs to be able to drop and then take the ball up with himself. He has to drop. The amount of times we've seen Watford last night in this 4-3-3 role, he just doesn't drop enough. He doesn't have the physical capability to drop into that left half space, especially through the lines. If you see the 1-2 or 1-3, whatever you want to call it, press, there were so many times you had space in the left half space in around the center circle where he could just be there, and we would have had a pass out. So I think those are the main things for me.
Yeah, mate. And you know what? Look, we don't have too much, but I kind of wanted to show. We've talked a lot about this double pivot change kind of in the second half, and I think Chris is just going to find the picture to put up right now, and it really shows it a little bit more clearly for people. And look, Granit here, he's doing what I think Granit should have done to begin the game. There's no use in crying over spilt milk, but it's really clear. You basically allow that overload on the right-hand side to happen. Look what it does. It immediately draws everybody, and you're open for a quick switch. And having Granit in the middle of the park is basically what opened things quite a bit. What's not here in the screenshot is, of course, Emile and Martinelli wide. But what it allows you to do is when you have this switch on, and with Granit having another option in the middle of the park, Gallagher is outnumbered. So immediately, instead of having an overload on that side and Gallagher basically man marking Thomas Partey, which again does the entirety of the half, Granit is another progressor that the team can use to get up the pitch. And this was beautiful. This by Granit was unbelievable. Granit in this role is where he's best. I know he's been asked to do a role that doesn't suit him, but ultimately this is the change that brought us the most success. And for me, it doesn't make sense while Tierney is out to not see this. We need to have that double pivot return. We need to have that security in the middle of the park. That for me is really the difference, in terms of just answering Tony really quickly. Is it the same system? Well, not really, because, Granit stepped in the middle of the park. You're going 2-3. So you may build with a 3 at the back here, but we build 3-1 normally with Partey deep and Xhaka high. Here, we're building with a 3-2. You're adding a man in midfield because Cedric is a part of the 3. So if you just look at it really quickly, mate, here, you've got Ben White, Gabriel, and Cedric make the back 3 in this instant, and you're building with Thomas Partey and Granit in the middle. Whereas before, if I was to show kind of the earlier, just give me 1 second, mate, earlier building 3-1. As you can see, there is no secondary pivot in the middle. That really is the difference. So I don't think that it's the same system. It's a tweak. And again, it's not a major difference, but it's enough, right, guys? Like this for me was the big point of the game. We were outnumbered in the middle of the park because of that system change. And when we added Granit Xhaka deep, you're building 3-2 instead of 3-1. And so
and even apart from the build-up, Emile was inside more.
No worries, Tony.
I saw what his combination play did in the left half space. It created that Erdegaard chance because Emile was heavily involved with his one touch pass to what's his name, Nketiah, that created the Erdegaard chance that we missed, obviously. And I just think Xhaka moving back just allows him to dictate play, allows him to get more touches of the ball. Because in the first half, he had 9 touches. Or not, sorry, in the first, not half, but first 20 to 30 minutes, he had 9 touches, and Emile had 11. And then being on the same side and Xhaka having less touches in the middle, 30 minutes into the game shouldn't be happening with the type of player Xhaka is. He likes to get a feel for the game, and we like him to be on the ball and to just dictate play and recycle the ball. And he couldn't do that being that high up the pitch. So the second half, even with Partey and Lokonga, it allowed us to not be like they stopped pressing. Obviously, Gallagher is very aggressive and a very good presser. So at times he'd do it by himself, but Mateta and Edouard stopped pressing. They got tired. Even Edouard, who came off the bench, didn't press. And having Xhaka deep just made their press ineffective because Xhaka could dictate as well as Lokonga.
Yeah, and look, guys, it's not a big change. Again, this is why I think these formation arguments are sometimes like battle lines. But this is what we need to do. Let's add another person in midfield, because even with the Thomas Partey injury, you're going to get Lukonga, and he needs somebody else next to him to close the space a little bit more. He needs somebody
It
like
gets
that.
him high up the pitch as well. It gets him
It
higher up
does.
the pitch, and it makes sure that you actually make sure that he's not entirely responsible for that first phase build up.
Mhm.
It keeps
And
him
I'm not
doing what he
worried
wants
about Nuno
best.
as well.
Mm.
Like I think you let Nuno be. I think he needs to be rehabilitated a little bit. Get him high up the pitch where he's more comfortable himself, and then you'll see him explode. I'm not too worried about that. I am worried in the manner that Mikel keeps taking him off. I don't think that's great. Like, he's got to stop that. That's what now Nottingham Forest, Liverpool.
Liverpool, yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
great. That's 3 times in the middle of a
With
season.
Lukonga, just to show people what it looked like, it did look like. It was the same, but with Lukonga higher.
Yeah.
Pretty
And when
much.
Lukonga is higher, by the way, it's where he's better. Like, he is much. I always describe Lukonga, for those that remember, as like Alex Song. I don't know if anybody remembers that player
Well,
that
I
used to
do,
play for
obviously.
us. Might be a little bit older, but he's Alex Song. He's somebody that wasn't the greatest defensively. He could do a job there, but what he was there to break lines. And so essentially what this does is it gets people where they need. Lukonga struggles off the ball. Get him a partner, an experienced partner that is really good with positioning. So we need to stop putting people where they're not comfortable. And it's football simple that way. I think Mikel really needs to learn that part of the game, no doubt about it. And then the third goal, guys, for me, I don't have much. I just think it's ridiculous that Odegaard is making that challenge in the box. And someone's just got to tell him,
Like, for me,
You're
no
not
one,
needed there.
no one's got to
Yeah.
tell him. He needs to learn it himself. Like, him.
By the way, Lukonga has this, mate. O'Malley, like, Lukonga has this as much,
And
on
a
the
ball
ball.
over the top.
He has a ball over the same that Alex Song used to have as well. So put him in the Alex Song areas. Don't make him the DM. We surrounded Alex Song with a more defensive partner for a reason, if you remember. But yeah, sorry, go ahead, mate.
With the goal, like, obviously, like, the goal shouldn't have happened at all for me. Like, Zaha shouldn't have got into the box, but he, as we said in the preview, he's probably the best ISO player in the league. So he receives in the halfway. We've got a diamond around him. Like, at this point, he shouldn't really make it past the halfway line.
No.
But obviously, who's that? Xhaka and White collapse, and Gabriel tries to commit. Obviously, Zaha evades him easily, and then he drives to the box. But when he gets to the box, there's 2 people in front of him, so there's no danger. Like, for me, Erdegaard and Cedric, who are running back, there's no danger there. So you don't need to commit, because your 2 centre backs are right in front of Zaha, and he's on his left foot. So there's nowhere for him to go, and your 2 big centre backs are there to block it, and he's got 1 partner. So right now it's a 4v2, but out of frame, Cedric is the closest player. So it's basically a 5v2, and Erdegaard doesn't need to commit. Obviously, he fouls him, and the rest is history. Zaha scores the pen, but this isn't the first time he makes the lazy challenge after running back from the box. Like, first Manchester United, he made the lazy challenge on Fred, which gave them the penalty that obviously Ronaldo scored. And then in this moment, we were on top, trying to get back into the game, and
it's super frustrating because
Chris,
it was the same story as United, though. We also were on top, and he kills you out of the game. And it's about being smart, mate. Like, for me, and he's an experienced player. He shouldn't be doing that.
Sorry to cut you off, but in that position, there's nothing the manager can tell him, "Oh, don't do anything." You yourself, as a player, have to see that there's 3 defenders around me, and there's one. He's a very, very good player. Zaha's very good, but there's 3 defenders in front of him. Like, what am I going to do from behind?
And the goalkeeper.
You don't need to take him out. Like, there's no need.
The defenders have done their job. They've shepherded him wide.
Tell him so much, but it's all on him at that point.
Yeah,
the other thing is, right?
Sorry, go ahead, Carter. Go ahead.
The other thing is, right? I mean, this is the perfect way to it's just popped in my head. Like, we had, I don't know if you remember seeing Mourinho talk about Balotelli, and they went to Ruben Kazan away, and he goes, for 14 minutes he spoke with Balotelli talking about, I have no strikers, no Melito, no Eto'o, no one. I have I have no ability to take you off
Don't
right
make
now.
a foul.
You have a yellow card. Don't
Yeah.
if there's a foul, no reaction. Don't put your foot in. Nothing. Please, Mario. Please. First 46 minutes, red card. You can't do things with that situation. You can't. Players are going to do what they want to do in that situation, and he has a rush of blood moment, and he makes that error, and it's a stupid
Look,
error. But that's completely on
he
him.
deserves praise for the endeavor to get back. But
Yeah.
these are dumb decisions that are not leadership. Okay, it's a lazy challenge, and if you're going to be back there, you do your job, and you have to recognize that your defenders are there for you, and you need to trust your teammates in that scenario. And
But no one. But the thing is, though, even if he was there by himself, no one's gonna blame him for Zaha getting past him,
no,
because Zaha gets past every defender in the league. So you being a midfielder, Zaha getting past you isn't a big deal. So you should. And Zaha's ahead of him. Like, you didn't need to swipe him like out of his feet, off of his feet. Sorry, in the box. Like, that was a rookie mistake, and it's not the first time it's happened this season from behind as well. Like, we're
away
losing.
again.
Yeah, we're losing. You can't do that when we're losing.
There is a discussion that needs to be had about Lacazette and Odegaard away. They don't do the same things, and more often than not, we've seen it. So I'm more inclined to give kind of Odegaard a pass than I am Lacazette, because he's really done a lot of errors. But again, tough rewatch, guys. But we had to break it
Very
down for
tough.
you. Okay. And look, it was tough to bring it to you guys. Like, we tried to be fair to everybody, and I know this is not a really tough game. No, top four is not done. Stop with that ridiculousness.
Let's praise before we go. I think we should praise Vieira, because he's 10th
Yeah.
now. Well, he's 9th, and he's on course to finish the highest
Top half.
Palace have ever finished in the Premier League in his first season. They finished 10th as the highest, and he's 9th right now. Obviously, they were great on the day, 3 goals without, or at least he's probably been their best player recently. Like,
Just a couple of shouts.
system
Tarek
work.
Mitchell, lovely game from
Look,
Tarek Mitchell.
Palace are everybody's second team, because he's doing, in a sense, of building the youngster way with a lot of flair. And he does deserve credit, because he came under a lot of criticism from his time in France, which was, again, both justified. Like, I think it was very clear that he's improved in his press. It's very clear that he's improved in his compactness in the middle of the park.
And his variation. Like,
yeah, and this isn't also a one-time thing, mate. Like, you talk about the point total, but you look at his performance against City and the big teams. He has his team playing
11 points. 11 points against the big teams.
The other thing I do want to talk about Vieira is his ability to switch between formations is something that I look for in a manager. To say, look, in game state, are you able to shift your midfield to adapt to the game? For example, there's been games against City where he's gone from started 4-3-3, switching to the pivot, and he's gone vice versa to turn it on. And he's really he's timed it very well, and his ability to mold a squad that is sort of there, sort of not.
It's very limited squad. It's very limited.
That's what I'm saying by sort of.
He built from the front. He made a conscious decision to build from the front, and that gives you time. I'd be interested to see what he does next season.
Even his back line
he bought. In fairness to him, he bought that centre back partnership where he's been there.
Where Anderson, Mitchell coming through is a great decision.
I mean, they were there for me. Like Anderson, Guehi was a really good pickup for me. Smart domestic scouting, but in general, he did build from the front, right? Like, when you look at it, Edouard, he got his Eze from before, but then you look at Olise,
Gallagher,
Mateta, bringing back Mateta into the fold.
He's done very well to be able to switch.
Lovely player, that Mateta, by the way,
and to put in these, like, the 4-4-1-1. Obviously, we do it, but they did it very well. I think he has a ways to go, like, with this Palace team, and with money, they can do something next season. But he should be like, it should be like very interesting. Like, teams and managers have done poorly in the past won't always be an indication of what they can do in the future. Like, he was poor at Nice, did show some tactical promise that he's showing now at Palace, but he was written off as soon as the season started and we saw.
Well, rightfully so. Anybody that
July.
watched Nice and Galtier, what he did to that squad is immense. But what he fixed was his press. That's what he fixed. You know, Vieira was not a good presser and not very good at coaching compactness in the middle of the park. I think he's got away with the profiles that he selected, I'll be honest, because as we saw in the second half, we're still able to cut through that middle of the park press. I think he has to do a bit better in his block and his block setups. And he does rely on his athletes to get him out of trouble.
It's very hard to do that with the DMs. The DM.
It is. He needs a DM, but that would be a summer transfer. Like, I'm looking towards the future. Let's see if he can improve that block a little bit more. But he's showing signs. For me, maybe to take it back to Arsenal a little bit really quickly is, guys, this is not a time to panic. This is not a time to, top 4 shouts are gone. Like, it's crazy. It's actually crazy.
It's the third game we've lost in this year, 2022.
Yeah. And the other 2 are what? City and Liverpool.
Yeah, it's the third game we've lost, and we've drawn once.
Everything that could go wrong did.
Burnley.
It's never nice to lose 3-0. It's never nice to lose 2 key pillars in your starting 11. I agree. I'm sympathetic with you, but I had this one line that I was trying to tell people, because I feel that people just go into hyperbole on this way too often. But ultimately, for a team, what you can't do is you can't let the anxiety of failure take over your confidence of success. So just let's focus on our own launch.
And I think all season, but for me with Arsenal fans, but aren't we used to losing? So that one loss shouldn't have.
I feel like it may be just a personal bias thing from me, but like I feel like the older fans have who've seen our team in the Champions League, who've seen like actual run-ins and seen top four run-ins, are not as hyperbolic. I see a lot of the younger fans who have not seen this top 4 run for a while going off. And the other thing I'm gonna mention is look, Spurs have a decent run-in, but it's not easy by any shouts. Liverpool, us, Villa, Leicester, they have some tough games and they are looking good. It is what it is. And I think on that note, we'll be back for Brighton. We have members content coming out. I think CK wanted to hold off on the vlog while the Palace game was on. And I think he'll post that soon. I've got a video coming up soon that I've been working on for almost 3 weeks now. Put a lot of effort into it. So on that note, I think that should be the end of it.
Make sure you guys do your thing. Like, comment, subscribe. We love the criticism, the constructive criticism, that is. We love the engagement. Thank you guys so much. And guys, keep your heads up, keep your chin up. Tough one to announce, but it does not define our season. Isolated games don't define you. Patterns of behavior do. So let's just pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and we go again, as the kids say. So keep the engagement high. Make sure you follow us at BoP. You can find all the boys on their socials down below. And we can't wait to give you that content. Keep out for, I guess, the preview and the vlogs, but all that stuff and more is coming. So thank you for sticking with us, guys. And we hope to see you guys on the Brighton preview.
All right. Bye now.
Peace.